We have several reports from texts that can be used to demonstrate the clear and direct involvement of women in political and cultural life. Beginning with the Prophet's time and the companions, this continued through the early centuries of the Hijrah until the Dark Ages, when the role of the free woman in public life was replaced by owned slavery, whether acquired through purchase or captured as a result of war, in the world of the arts and in the royal courts. Inequality between men and women, between a strong authoritarian owner and a powerless owned, took on a new form as a result of this. Despite what might have appeared to be a split between men's and women's societies, Sufi circles continued to be, for the most part, open to people of all genders. They did this by viewing women as humans, not as objects, and as having the same capacity for gnosis and closeness to God as men. Quote, woman is a ray of God. She is not that earthly beloved. She is creative, not created. The aphorism of Rumi, as a famous Sufi poet of the 13th century, describes how he, as a Sufi, views a woman. In the Sufi world, women who walk on the spiritual path have an equal position as men. There is no doubt that history has recorded how pre-Islamic Arabs gave sexist gender stereotypes to women. Baby girls were considered a calamity and disgrace to the family. This is described in the Quran, and when one of them receives tidings of a female child, his face darkens and he is choked with anguish. Such a stereotypical understanding of gender was finally dismantled by the presence of Islam brought by the Prophet Muhammad. Islam conveys its message to all mankind, namely women and men. As God says, whosoever works righteousness, whether male or female, and is a believer, we shall give them new life, a good life, and we shall surely render unto them their reward in accordance with the best of that which they used to do. The verse overhauled the social system that existed at the time. With that verse, Islam shows that women are equal in their faith in God. The existence of women is really cared for and taken into account, not just as an object of entertainment, satisfaction, or just a companion for men. This is the legitimacy of women to become spiritual subjects. The spiritual subject meant here is that women in the practice of worship and spiritual matters are truly responsible for themselves. Of course, this is one of the most advanced issues of feminism because it was proposed 14th centuries ago. In terms of spirituality, women are in full control of themselves. So everything that is carried out by woman, God has promised to give a reward. If a woman does a bad deed, then she gets punishment. Likewise, if she does a good deed, only she also gets the reward. Here it is clear that man cannot intervene in woman's spiritual practice. When in traditional Arab society, woman was still man's responsibility. Before God, woman is a free individual. Thus, when walking the spiritual path, woman is completely equal to man. In the Sufi world, as a spiritual path, the travelers or salikun were not only men, but there were also many Sufi women. Rkia Elaroui, as a female Sufi icon in the 8th century who promoted the divine love, al-hub al-ilahi, was not the only female Sufi in the history of Islamic mysticism. There were many other Rabi'as. Another Rabia is Fatima an-Nishapur. Someday, a great Sufi in the 9th century, Dhunnun al-Misri, refused a gift from someone. Dhunnun refused the gift because the giver was a woman. He straightforwardly rejected anything given by women. We don't know on what basis Dhunnun had to refuse a gift from a woman, but it is quite clear that he would accept the gift if the giver was not a woman. Wisely enough, the woman gave Dhunnun a sarcastic warning to quickly ask him to review the basic issues in Sufism that perhaps he had forgotten. That a Sufi should not see anything that appears in front of him physically or outwardly, but should only see the true giver behind it, namely God. The woman is Fatima an-Nishapur, a daughter of a respected person in Balkh. She was known to have left the glitter of her worldly life to take a spiritual journey in the Sufi world. Although it cannot certainly be understood, we can interpret that Dhunnun's refusal to have been given a gift by a woman was a gender stereotype that was still common at the time. It's not that such an excuse justified Dhunnun's position as a man, but Fatima Anishapu overturned such gender pride by inviting him to review the basic concepts of Sufism. Of course, Dhunnun was shocked, not only because Fatima apparently knew better than him, but also because Dhunnun himself violated the basic principles of Sufism. Fatima Anishapu was also known as a female scholar of her time who was respected for being an expert in elucidating the deepest meanings of the Quranic verses. She spent her time worshipping in Mecca. Apart from being a contemporary of Dhunnun, Fatima was also a contemporary of another great male Sufi, Bayazid Bastami. It cannot be denied that, besides Rkia Elaroui, Fatima Anishapu was one of the greatest female Sufis of her time. This was confirmed by Bayazid's own confession. Quote, "During my life, I only saw a true male Sufi and a true female Sufi. A true female Sufi is nobody but Fatima Anishapu." According to Bayazid, there were no spiritual experiences that he discussed with Fatima except that Fatima had experienced them herself. Apart from that, perhaps partly because of Fatima's warning about Dhunnun previously, Dhunnun, when asked, "Who is the most extraordinary person you have ever met?" answered, "I have never met anyone more extraordinary than a woman I met in Mecca, a woman named Fatima Anishapu." Dhunnun himself was a student of Fatima because he often asked her for spiritual advice. Apart from that kind of relationship, Dhunnun also once said, "Fatima is the beloved among God's lovers. She is also my master, Ustadi." Meanwhile, Fatima's relationship with Bayazid was a friendship on a spiritual path. Fatima was a Sufi woman who didn't adhere to the principle of celibacy like Rkia Elaroui. She got married to a Sufi named Ahmad bin Khidruya. As a husband and a wife, in addition to the biological relationship that took place between the two, they actually also built a spiritual relationship in their household. In fact, Fatima was recognized as her husband's guide because she had guided her husband in matters of spiritual practice. Certainly, this seemed revolutionary that even though in the social order in society, Fatima's husband was an imam, in the spiritual realm, the imam was spiritually Fatima. Another Sufi at the time, Abu Hafiz al-Haddad, was touched by such a thing. Abu Hafiz was a Sufi who, for some reason, didn't like listening to women talk. However, after meeting Fatima, he said, "I came to understand, after all, God gives noses to whomever He wants." Fatima's friendship with the great Sufis at the time caused jealousy from her husband. Of course, Fatima clarified the matter. She explained that after all, there was no need for anyone to be jealous, that her friendship with other Sufis was only a spiritual closeness, while a relationship with her husband was a natural as well as spiritual one. Here, Fatima actually left a clear trail of ideas about marriage. For her, marriage doesn't necessarily make someone ignorant of the spiritual path, and vice versa, the spiritual path doesn't suddenly make someone to live celibate forever. Fatima's friendship with the Sufis continued. However, her friendship with Bayazid faded because when they were talking about spirituality, Bayazid, whether intentionally or not, saw Fatima's henna hands, and Bayazid asked about it. Surely Fatima was annoyed with Bayazid's attitude. Previously, Fatima's relationship with Bayazid, which was only divinely oriented, later realized by Fatima that the relationship had changed in terms of outward appearance. Of course, for Fatima, this polluted their spiritual relationship. More than that, the two friends who previously occupied the position of subject in discussing the divine path shifted their axis to where Fatima felt she was an object because her physical appearance was objectified by Bayazid. Exactly, Fatima didn't want to be an object. Thus, the arguments for the equality of women and men since that time was clearly shown by the presence of Fatima Anishapu. Her presence in the Sufi world had dismantled social stereotypes and gender biases that were overly established at the time. Fatima died in age 38 when she performed Umrah. Even though Fatima al-Nishabu has passed away physically, the brilliance of her being a Sufi, which demonstrates egalitarianism, continues to make an impression. There were not only Rkia and Fatima al-Nishabu, but also several female figures related to the life of Ibn Arabi, who holds the title Shaykhul Akbar in the history of Sufism. In Ibn Arabi's spiritual life, there were at least 3 women who had important influences on Ibn Arabi's spiritual journey. The first 2 figures were named Yasmin and Fatima binti al-Muthanna al-Qurtubi. Both were shaykhos, or female masters on the spiritual path. Yasmin was a friend of Ibn Arabi, while Fatima was a spiritual mother for him. Fatima al-Qurtubi had many students, and one of them was Ibn Arabi, who was under her guidance for 2 years. She used to tell Ibn Arabi, "I am your divine mother and the light of your earthly mother." And she was the only one Ibn Arabi called my mother. Ibn Arabi was not ashamed to follow her guidance, to submit to her authority, or to act as a disciple in front of her divine knowledge. Ibn Arabi's assertion that a woman can be a sheikh and a spiritual guide, and that man is permitted to be a woman's disciple, is a proof of the spiritual reality. Therefore, disregard those who, under the guise of gender mixing, fail to perceive how a man may be a woman's disciple. Historically, and even today, women have been counted among the disciples of male sheikhs. The ability for divine knowledge and learning is at issue here. The third woman was Nizam binti Makinuddin. Ibn Arabi met her while performing the Hajj in Makkah. The encounter with Nizam inspired Ibn Arabi to write a collection of his poems entitled Tarjumanul Ashwaq, Translation of Desires. In this case, for Ibn Arabi, witnessing God in a woman is a perfect witness. This is because the manifestation of God, or the tajalli, in a woman is both active and receptive. Quote, "Man's witness of al-haq in the woman is the most complete and perfect, because he witnesses al-haq with respect to his being, both passive and active." From Ibn Arabi's statement above, it can be seen how a male Sufi views the high spiritual position of woman for the spiritual journey of man. In addition, the woman also turns out to be a spiritual subject for herself in her spiritual wanderings, as shown by Ibn Arabi, who had become a disciple of his master, Fatima al-Qurtubi. Nevertheless, the role of women in Sufism is still not exposed so much and often that the people still often assume that a woman is not spiritual subject, be it traveler or master. In the Middle Ages, as the patriarchal system was still strong and dominant, of course, woman was still given a bad stigma by the surrounding community. That is, woman was intrinsically still considered half of man, which is so wrong. Therefore, a Sufi from Nishapu, Fariduddin Attar, when writing the hagiography of Rkia al-Adawiyyah, raised the status of women by saying, quote, "In God's path, woman is man, and no one can call her woman." Now, however, socially and politically, woman is really equal to man. Likewise, in the spiritual world, inevitably, woman in the view of Sufism has an autonomous role as a spiritual subject. Thank you so much for watching. You can help me out monetarily, be it PayPal or Patreon. I'll see you next time.